She fainted just as she was signing the divorce papers. That would be the end, the last act of a story that was already in ruins. But what her ex-husband discovered in hospital changed everything, irreversibly. Imagine believing you knew someone completely until the silence between you revealed truths that words could never carry. A broken heart, an unexpected child, a past that doesn't know how to go away, and love. It was still there, hidden among the rubble of what was left. In this story, you'll discover that the real period can actually be the most important comma in your life. But beware, until the very last second, you won't know for sure if forgiveness will win out over pride, or if time will erase what the heart can't forget. Get ready to dive into an intense journey where every choice can change everything, and every silence can say more than 1,000 words. Are you ready to feel the weight of a love that, although broken, still pulses? Then stay until the end. What happens here will mark you. The silence between them was thick, almost palpable. John stared at Marta from across the notary's desk, not saying a word. She held the pen tightly, her fingers rigid, as if the slightest tremor could give away everything she still felt. She signed, quickly, without hesitation. Her name was now one more signature on a printed impersonal document. He, in turn, picked up the pen with almost surgical precision. His expression was impassive, as if this was just another contract to be signed. "Do you still expect me to say something?" he muttered, his voice dry. "No, I just want it to be over soon," Marta replied, without looking at him. John signed, and then it was over. There was no hug, no tears, no parting words, just a discreet nod, a silent goodbye. Marta felt something tighten inside her chest, but it wasn't regret. It was exhaustion. She stood up, papers in hand. The step she took was small, but inside her everything shook. The sharp sound in her ears was the first sign. Then the ground seemed to give way beneath her feet. John heard her body fall before he even saw her collapse. "Marta!" he shouted, already at her side within seconds. She was pale, her eyes closed, her breathing short. "Marta, talk to me, please," she begged, her voice no longer as controlled as usual. Staff ran around. John ignored everything. He held her hand as if it were the only link to reality. "Someone call an ambulance!" he roared, louder than he intended. Time became a blur. The sirens echoed like a nightmare. Marta's hand, even unconscious, was still warm. He didn't understand why, but it mattered. In the hospital, the smell of antiseptic took over. John paced back and forth in the corridor, unable to sit down. Every time he thought of the image of her slumped over, his heart raced. "It can't end like this," he muttered to himself, his eyes fixed on the door of the consulting room. A nurse appeared. "She's stable, but you need to rest. The doctor will talk to you soon." John nodded, his jaw cracking. When he finally saw her in bed, with her eyes closed and her face so fragile, he realized how much there was in her that he didn't understand. "Why now? Why now?" he whispered, pulling out the chair to stand next to her. He had no answers. Only the sound of the heart monitor and the fear that what they had finished might not really be over. When Marta opened her eyes, the white light in the room almost blinded her. She blinked slowly, feeling the thin air in her lungs. The pale ceiling, the sterile walls, the constant beeping of the monitor, it all seemed like a bad dream, or perhaps an end. She turned her face and saw John sitting on the side of the bed. The jacket he was wearing earlier was crumpled, his tie loosened, but what caught her eye were his eyes. Those eyes, so closed before, now looked like they had seen a ghost. "Are you okay?" he asked, low, as if any louder sound could break her. Marta hesitated before answering. "I'm still trying to understand where I am." Before another word could be said, the door opened and a doctor walked in. He carried a clipboard with the tests and an expression that tried to be neutral but failed. "Mrs. Marta, the tests have arrived. The fainting was caused by a drop in pressure, something common considering your condition." "My condition?" she repeated, confused. The doctor looked at John, then back at Marta. "Congratulations, you're pregnant. 3 months." The silence was immediate. Marta felt the blood drain from her face. 3 months. She blinked, trying to understand. That can't be right." John didn't move. He wasn't even breathing. His eyes were fixed on her, as if searching for an answer. 3 months, she repeated, as if saying it out loud would make it more real. The doctor nodded slightly and left the room, leaving the two of them immersed in an emotional vacuum. Marta put her hand to her belly without thinking. A life inside her. Now, in the middle of the end. "I had no idea," she whispered, more to herself. John let out a breath for the first time since hearing the news. "Is it mine?" She turned her face towards him, surprised by the question. "Of course it is. You know it is." He nodded slowly, but his gaze remained lost. "That changes everything." "No," she cut him off quickly. "It doesn't change anything. You're still the man who signed the papers. And you're still the woman who held the shaking pen," he retorted, his voice firmer. Marta felt her heart race. "I was shaking because I was exhausted, not because I doubted it. And I signed it because I thought it was what you wanted," he replied, leaning forward a little. "It wasn't what I wanted," she said at last. "It was what I needed." Tension filled the space again. John lowered his eyes and took a deep breath. "What now?" Marta stared at the ceiling again, her hand still on her belly. "Now, I need to think." He didn't answer. He just stood there, motionless, as if he finally understood that this time he wouldn't be the one to dictate the next steps. Marta remembered the beginning as if it had all happened in another life. The first time she saw John, she couldn't have imagined the impact he would have. It was a business trip, an ordinary evening, a solitary dinner in a hidden restaurant. He sat down at the next table, ordered red wine, and noticing that she was reading the same author he loved, commented with a slight smile, "I like people who read that book. They're usually trying to understand themselves." She looked up, intrigued. "Or maybe they're just running away from reality," he replied with a half-smile. "Sometimes the two things are the same," he replied, holding out his hand. "John." "Marta," he replied, accepting the squeeze. The touch was brief, but charged with something she couldn't quite put her finger on. What began with dinner turned into intense days. Long conversations, walks in the night, lingering glances. He was charming, articulate, and seemed to hear what she wasn't saying. For the first time in a long time, Marta felt seen. When they returned from their trip, the meetings continued. The courtship was quick, the engagement even more so. She was in love. John made her feel safe, wanted, alive. But the intensity that attracted her also carried a shadow that she only noticed when she was already inside the wedding. John was meticulous, strategic. He wanted control of everything, including her. "You don't have to work anymore, Marta. I can look after both of us," he said one morning while she was getting ready for the job she loved. "But I like what I do," she replied, trying to keep her tone light. "I'm just saying it's not necessary," he insisted, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Then came the comments about clothes, about her friendships, about the places she went, all disguised as concern. "That dress, it's a bit much, don't you think? For lunch with friends, I don't see a problem," she retorted, trying not to get angry. "It's just, you know how people talk." At first, Marta gave in. She wanted to avoid conflict. But over time, she felt herself shrinking inside her own body. The evenings were no longer filled with laughter, the dinners turned into silence, and when she finally tried to speak, he deflected. "I need space, John." "Space? You're being dramatic," he replied, like someone closing a door. It was then that she understood. It wasn't a home, it was an invisible prison. And the more she tried to be heard, the more muffled she became. "You're making up problems," he said every time she tried to explain how she felt. The worst part? Marta believed it for a while. She thought that maybe she was the problem, until she realized that she no longer recognized herself in the mirror. And when she finally filed for divorce, John just stayed silent as if nothing had touched him. But now, with her pregnancy, the past wasn't just a memory. It was a ghost coming back with force. And she had to decide whether she still wanted to face it or whether it would be best to bury it for good. The hospital room was plunged into an uncomfortable silence. Marta stared at the window, arms crossed, trying to contain the wave of thoughts that was pressing down on her. John remained there, sitting on the side of the bed, his hands nervously intertwined. "Do you really want to talk about this now?" she asked without looking away. "I can't think of a better time." "Not after what we found out," he replied, his voice low but firm. "Found out?" Marta turned around slowly. "I found out. You just listened." John shifted in his chair, uncomfortable. "Still, we're in this together. I can't just walk away." "But you did, John, the moment you stopped listening to me, the moment you turned me into a piece in your game." He stood up, his eyes squeezed shut. "That's not fair. I've made mistakes, yes, but you never gave me a chance to put it right. And when I tried to talk, when I begged you to see me," she raised her voice, "do you know what you said? That I was dramatic." "Because I didn't know how to deal with everything," he retorted, his tone higher. "I thought I was protecting you, but I was protecting myself. From fear, from failure, from losing you." The words hung between them, thick, sharp. Marta lowered her eyes. "And now? Now I want to do something different," he said, calmer. "I want to be present. Not like before, not to control, but to take care. For you." "What if I don't want you around?" she asked, looking straight into his eyes. "I won't force anything, but I will fight. Because I'm afraid too, Marta. Afraid of losing you. Afraid of losing this son. Afraid of losing the chance to be better." She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of confusion inside her chest. The next day, John showed up with a bag. Marta arched an eyebrow. "What's that?" "Ginger tea. I read that it helps with nausea. And this pillow, well, I thought it might make you more comfortable." She looked at the objects, then at him. "You've always been great with gestures, John, but that's not what makes me trust you." "I know," he said, sitting down again. "I just don't know where else to start." Marta sighed. His face looked sincere for the first time in a long time, but she was too tired to feel anything but doubt. "I need time," she murmured. "Then I'll wait," he replied without hesitation. She looked at him with some surprise. "Even if it takes months? Even if it lasts as long as it does," he said. "Because for once it's not about me." Marta looked away, and a knot tightened in her throat. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to start over. But she wasn't sure she could pay the price of risking it all again. The following weeks were strangely silent. Marta didn't push him away, but she didn't call him either. John appeared from time to time, always with something simple in his hands. A bottle of sparkling water, a maternity magazine, cut fruit. He didn't say much. Neither did she. But there was something in that silence. He was listening now. One afternoon, she had a bout of nausea and sat down on the sofa, exhausted. A few minutes later, she heard the doorbell. When she opened the door, John was there, holding out a steaming mug. "Chamomile with lemon." "You can help," he said without inviting himself in. "How did you—" "You mentioned it once when you had the flu." "I saved it," she replied with a small smile. Marta took the mug, hesitantly. "Thank you, Marta." "No need to thank me," he replied. "I just want you to know that I'm around, even if it doesn't seem like it." She closed the door carefully. For the first time in a long time, her chest felt a little lighter. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. The following week, she happened to bump into Eduardo, an old work colleague. It was a chance meeting in front of a cafe. They chatted for a few minutes about the past and laughed about old stories. When Marta went into the office for her antenatal appointment, she didn't expect to see John waiting outside. "How did it go?" he asked, smiling. "Fine. The baby's growing normally," he said, and she almost offered her hand with the ultrasound but pulled back. "That's good," he replied, not noticing the gesture, but his countenance changed as he noticed something. "You were with him, weren't you?" Marta frowned. "What?" "Eduardo, I saw you talking. We happened to bump into each other. We talked, that's all." "Of course, just a coincidence," said John, with a tone she knew well. Cold, sarcastic. "Are you really doing this?" Her voice became harsh. "He always wanted more than friendship. You know that. And you've always distrusted me." "Even when I gave you every reason to trust me," Marta retorted. "I'm just trying to protect me from what, John? From myself? From a friend who never crossed any boundaries? From all this happening again?" he replied without looking at her. She took a deep breath, crossing her arms. "You promised you'd change, and I'm trying. Trying isn't enough if all you do is watch me and wait for me to make a mistake." John looked at her with visible pain in his eyes, but she didn't back down. "I'm not going to live under suspicion again," she said, turning to leave. "Not for you, not for anyone." He didn't follow her, and for the first time she didn't look back. The apartment was silent, but something in the air said it wasn't a lasting peace. Marta paced back and forth with her arms crossed, her mind racing. She picked up her cell phone and looked at John's latest messages, some still unread. None aggressive, none demanding, just silent presences. "If you need anything, I'm here. I hope you're resting. I thought about you today." But even the absence of control could still be a reminder of the past. A weight she didn't know if she could carry anymore. It was time to leave, at least for a while, to breathe somewhere else, to feel alone again. Not just accompanied by someone who, even though he had changed, still bore the reflection of the man who had silenced her for so long. She wrote a simple note and left it on the living room table. "I need distance to breathe, and perhaps to survive." And then she closed the door behind her. A few days later, John arrived at the apartment with a bag in his hands. A packet of the cookies she liked, a new book about raising children, and a small flower in a makeshift vase. He rang the doorbell and waited. No answer. She tried calling. The phone rang until it went to voicemail. Then he looked down and saw the folded note. He read it with his eyes fixed on it, as if each letter were a punch in the chest. He felt his legs go weak. He went down to the entrance and asked the doorman if he had seen her leave. "She went away," said the man with a look of pity. "She rented the apartment for a while. She said she needed a break from the city." John walked back up to the door. He leaned his forehead against the wood. The emptiness there was different from all the times she had asked for space. It was definitive. He sat on the floor of the corridor, his back against the wall. She didn't cry, but she couldn't breathe properly either. Marta was gone. And this time, there was nothing he could do. The next few days were slow and cruel. John tried to work, he tried to sleep, he tried to think about anything other than her absence. But every corner of the house, every smell, every memory felt like an open wound. When he finally accepted that there was no point in forcing it, he put his cell phone away. No new messages, no returned calls. All that remained was the echo of what hadn't been said, the regret of words that should have been swallowed, and the deafening silence of someone who realizes, too late, that love doesn't survive on promises alone. The call came when the sky was still dark. The cell phone vibrated on the nightstand, insistent. John answered without even looking at the number. "Hello? Mr. John? This is the hospital. Mrs. Marta has been admitted. It's urgent. Can you come now?" My blood ran cold. "What's wrong? What's happened?" "Complications in the pregnancy. We need your immediate presence." He couldn't remember how he left the house, nor the way, only the sound of his own heart hammering, as if it were trying to break through his chest. When he arrived at the hospital, the sour smell and the cold glare of the corridors made him shudder. "Marta, where is she?" The receptionist indicated a closed room. Before he could approach, a nurse intercepted him. "She's in the operating room. There's been a premature detachment of the placenta. The situation is delicate." "Surgery?" "My God." The doctors are doing their best, but if we have to choose, you'll be consulted. John staggered to a chair, sat down without feeling his body. The nurse's words echoed in his head. Choose? As if that were possible. As if there was a right answer. Minutes or centuries later, the doctor appeared. His face said more than any words. We're at a crossroads, sir. We need to act now. The lives of the mother and the baby are at risk. If necessary, who should we prioritize? John felt his world spinning. His hands were shaking. He tried to speak, but his voice wouldn't come out. Then he remembered. One night when Marta was lying on the sofa, stroking her still discreet belly, he heard her whisper, thinking he was asleep, "I'd do anything for you, my little love." He took a deep breath. Save the baby. The doctor nodded and disappeared down the corridors. John stood there, feeling empty. He had made the cruelest choice of his life, and paradoxically the right one. Time no longer existed. The walls seemed to move. Every time someone passed him, he waited to hear the final verdict. When the door opened, a nurse appeared. "Sir, she's alive. The baby too." He didn't understand. He didn't understand. "We managed to stabilize her in time. They're both out of danger, but they'll need intensive care." John let out a breath as if for the first time. He followed the nurse into the room. Marta was pale, her eyes ajar, her breathing shallow. When she saw him, she tried to smile. I chose what you would have chosen," he said, holding her hand tightly. She cried, not from pain, but from something deeper. A silent recognition. For the first time, John didn't try to fix anything. He just stayed by her side, and that was all she needed. Time slowed down. Visits to the hospital became routine. Marta was still recovering from surgery, and the baby, a boy, remained under observation. But every day, he grew stronger. John visited him whenever he could. He spent hours observing that body, so small, so fragile, but full of life. Marta, at first, watched him from a distance. There was still pain, but there was also silence, a different kind of silence from before. It was the silence of presence, of constancy. And this was beginning to open small cracks in the barriers she had built. One morning, when she woke up, she found a mug of decaf coffee and a folded note next to her bed. "If you need silence, I'm here. If you need a voice too." She smiled. In time, she returned home with the baby in her arms. John offered to help, but didn't insist. He just made himself present, bringing diapers, preparing the tea she liked, cleaning the dishes without saying a word. Sometimes he would spend hours just holding the little one in his arms, rocking him in silence. "You don't have to do all this," she said one evening, as he folded a pile of small clothes. "I know," he replied, "but I want to, and I would," without expecting anything in return. For the first time, she felt that he was accompanying her rather than leading her. It disconcerted her, and it comforted her. There was a day when she woke up frightened, her baby crying loudly, her chest tight. She rushed up only to find him in John's arms, already swaddled. Marta stood in the doorway watching, the way he held his son with a delicacy she had never imagined she would see in such a man. The look of adoration, the patience, something broke inside her, and something began to rebuild. Without saying a word, she went in and sat down next to him on the sofa. They stayed like that side by side for long minutes. When their hands touched, it was by chance, but neither of them backed down. The night the rain fell hard, Marta watched from the window, her heart silent. John was about to leave when she spoke. "Stay." He stopped. "Stay how?" She looked him in the eye. "As you are now, without promising anything, just stay." He didn't hesitate. He approached slowly, and when their lips met, it was different. There was no urgency. There were no doubts. It was a choice. When they pulled apart, she murmured, "That doesn't mean we're together." "I know," he replied with a serene smile. "But it means that there's still something here." And there was. A new beginning, made up of small decisions, built on ruins, but with room to flourish.